What's going on, guys? Adam Green here with No More News. Thank you all for joining me today, Sunday, April 6, 2025. Neil is back, Gnostic Informant. You guys are about to get true gnosis. What's up,
Right.
Neil? Thanks for being here.
What's going on, dude?
Not much, just ready to get into all this and have another chat with you. I was watching the last hour, I was watching your latest video you put out with this scholar saying that Paul's epistles are all forgeries and that Paul never even existed. Really interesting stuff. And I'm already sold, honestly. I say that sarcastically, but like just like with Jesus mythicism, like it's always just been, well, everybody agrees the 7 authentic epistles and he definitely existed, just like they say Jesus definitely existed. But when you actually, a scholar goes and looks at the why they say that, there's nothing there, and in fact evidence that they didn't exist.
Yeah, and I when I first heard about her, I was like, really, Paul didn't exist and his letters are forged? I was like, why? Like, why can't we just grant that there's a guy who wrote 7 letters named Paul? And then I talked to her, I sat down with her and listened to her arguments, and I think she's onto something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's got at least the same thing. Yeah.
I said to you when you said you were having her on, and I've been seeing other, like Jacob had her on, I believe, or at least some, and I know Dr. Robert Price has always questioned if Paul really existed, but I've always kind of dismissed it and just thought, well, everybody agrees, nobody's disputing it really. Right. And but then when you see like why they actually believe it, and it's some like Protestant theologians that, you know, did the research, and it's deeply flawed, and nobody would take their criteria seriously today.
Right.
It makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm. And as we were talking about in the discussion, how you have the Old Testament Saul, his name is Saul, and he represents the old kingdom. David represents this new united kingdom, right? And Saul is chasing after David, who's the anointed king, the Messiah, right? It literally uses the word Messiah or Christ in the Greek. And Saul's chasing him around, and then David asked Saul, why do you diokase me? In Greek, the word diokase means pursue or persecute. He said, why are you pursuing me? And in the New Testament, another character whose also his name is Saul of Tarsus. You call him Paul, and Paul is the Latin name, I guess. But anyways, same name, chasing around the Christians, and Jesus comes up to him and goes, Saul, why do you diokase me? Why do you persecute me? Pursue me. So like there's a mimesis. It looks like a mimesis right there. I think it's a solid argument.
Just like all the other names, like Judah and Judas, and Arimathea is another one.
Yeah.
Comes up.
Well, I think it's a strong argument. So the idea that, I mean, especially if we flip it around, because this is the axiom, the assumption in biblical scholarship that's not questioned. It's just an axiom that everything else falls in line after, and that is Paul wrote 7 authentic epistles. And why are they authentic? Because Paul wrote them, and since Paul wrote them, they're authentic. You see the circular? And it just keeps going and going, and there's nobody you can't get out of it. So she's saying, okay, how do we know that these 7 authentic epistles weren't written in response to Acts, not Acts writing in response to these letters, like drawing a narrative from the letters, but the other way around? You already have Acts, and then someone comes along and derives these letters from Acts. Then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. If that's the case, it's more likely that this is a literary trope made up.
She said she believed in the Marcionite priority Paul too, right?
Yeah, she said like she thinks that Marcion could have been part of the whole entire psyop, like writing these epistles. They could have been the one writing these epistles.
And like which that. Robert Price has always said too. He's always been basically sort of a Marcionite. Not that he believes it, but that he thinks it came first, not like everybody says.
And you and I were talking about Marcion, and he almost doesn't make any sense when you're like, why would somebody who's so anti-Judaism want to even play around with this religion at all? Why does he just become a Platonist or something?
Mhm.
But like Marcion represents a type of person of the time period who is trying to take over this or re-envision this religion for Gentiles. And he was very serious about it, to the point where they're starting to argue now that the true God is Jesus' father, but the Old Testament God must have been some sort of demon or something. Like that becomes a Marcionite idea. And it's all, and you see the same attitude today with Christians who don't even realize it, that they're like these Christians who are anti-Semitic, but like they look silly because you worship a Jewish dude. I mean, you're also anti-Semitic at the same time. You're like, it's like a
Well, the dispute is in Marcion's letters, it was the original version, and then a bunch of different people claimed he was a heretic and added in all this Jewish stuff, or was Christianity started with Jews and then that he removed all the Jewish stuff? And I think it's more likely. I find it weird that all of these different people would call him the heretic, and that they would add in all of this stuff to his movement. I find that less likely than him taking it out.
But remember, you and I were talking about this not too long ago, how during the Maccabee period in the 150s BC, there was a struggle between the Hellenist and the traditionalist. And like there is a history going back all the way to the 150s BC up until Paul's time of Greek-speaking Jews that want to take the whole movement into a more universalistic world. And instead of the temple, they want it to be like international. That's been a movement in Judaism going back all to the Maccabees. Then his name is Jesus. He changed his name to Jason to sound more Greek. It's Jason Maccabees, which is his real birth name was Jesus Yeshua Maccabeus. So like that Paul, the whole Paul thing was a movement that was already going on for centuries. You know what I mean? Like the idea of people like Paul, I should say, going around trying to sell Judaism to the masses.
My other thoughts on Paul is that if they were faking him, they must have started with something. Like they had something to work with at the beginning, some type of letter, some type of previous movement. Because if they were creating all of Paul's letter and Paul the character from scratch, I feel like they would have had him know Jesus and seen Jesus. They wouldn't have him. Yeah, like because if they wouldn't invent a person that would invent a person, they wouldn't invent Paul who would go forth and invent Jesus from the scriptures. So that's
why would you not go all the way and say, here, this is our guy Paul. He was literally there, one of the 12, like something like that. But maybe
he knew him. He walked around with him. Like if they are forging all of that, because if you look at Paul's letters, it's like he doesn't even know of a Jesus. He knows none of the biographical details. Never met him. Never talks about anybody meeting him. So if it's forged to prove a Jesus, they would have been better proof of a Jesus.
But unless what Nina's saying, if Acts comes first, so let's say that Paul is a made up character from the book of Acts. There's no letters at all. They just created this story using the name of Saul, and they're recreating a New Testament version of Saul. And then somebody comes along, reads this story. The story takes place after Jesus' ascension. So Paul in the story of Acts was placed after Jesus' ascension. So if they're writing letters in Paul's name, they can't make him meet Jesus because according to Acts, he never met Jesus in person, only on the road to Damascus.
But I understand Acts is like trying to harmonize and like retell the origins of Christianity, and it's any scholar that I take seriously knows it's almost all fiction. But if they're going to try to, there had to be something there for them to try to harmonize it and explain the origins of Christianity. So like, are we going to say there wasn't a Peter, there wasn't a James too? I think it does make most sense that there was a Peter and James with the Jewish church and Jerusalem church, and then Paul, who was Hellenized and taking it to the Gentiles.
Even if she's right about Paul being a literary construct, people like Paul existed. There were historical Paul-like people out there that were doing what Paul was doing. So either way, it doesn't really matter.
There's also, like, this reminds me of Robert Price connecting Paul to Simon Magus. He thinks Simon Magus is really who Paul is based on, right? That's one example. And also in the Jewish Secret Life of Jesus, the Total Yeshu, they describe a character as Peter as going to the Jesus followers and the Gentiles, but that's like the Paul's role. So even rabbis will say, like, it could be about Paul because it kind of matches Paul more than what Peter did.
And they kind of, it's funny because he's like a Forrest Gump character, kind of. He's involved in all these crazy historical events, appealing to Caesar, getting in front of Agrippa, getting chased by King Aretas. These are all real historical big people that are well known, well documented. There's even a fake letter between him and Seneca that never happened. So he ends up becoming this like Forrest Gump character where he's nobody in history as far as like the historical sources go, but all of a sudden there's this giant narrative written about him in this book called Acts where he's doing all this crazy shit and you're getting involved with all these historical leaders of the world. Like, it's weird. It is
that's such a good analogy. I've never heard that before. He's the Forrest Gump. Christians go like, oh, they go, Jesus is real, like, because Pilate's real, and you know the Jordan River's real and stuff, and he did this with Herod, and it's like, right. Actually, they just wrote that in Luke, which they say that the Marcionite book was a version of Luke, and it's Luke Acts, and also like, do you believe that Luke copied from Josephus?
Yeah, Luke. Like verbatim uses the same phrases that Josephus uses when mentioning.
He peppered in historical stuff from Josephus, to make it seem historical.
And that means we're talking Luke, one of the earliest gospels, and Josephus was written at 96, finished by 96. So that means Luke would have to be somewhere around 99 to 110, at least. This pushes all this stuff, whether we agree with Nina or not, Dr. Nina or not. It's all pushing Christianity farther back into the 2nd century, just like all the other scholarship that's pushing Judaism back into the Hellenistic period, away from the Iron Age, into this 3rd century BCE movement to the 2nd century. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy? Christianity is going farther into the future, and so they're both moving along like a giant iceberg or something.
Well, believers have always tried to date it as old as possible. They've always had the bias, and just like with Paul, you can't, just like with Jesus, you can't just say, well, the consensus of the scholars has always been, because the consensus of the scholar has always been dominated by Christians and believers.
Even right now, there's still that force, that social force in biblical scholarship circles like SBL, those places. And there's a social force that's pushing towards a more liberal, universal message of Christianity that you're finding in a lot of these places now. But that's the sort of force in academia. And even though they're more liberal and they're more like, and they believe in evolution, stuff like that, they're not young earth creationist Christians. They're more like the West Huff style Christian, right? Or something like that. What was I going to say?
Maintaining Jesus, like SBL.
That's right. There's the as far liberal as they are. I forgot what I was going to say, but now I got it. They still hold up these two pillars. That number one, Jesus had to have existed. The 7 authentic epistles have to be authentic. Like you can't question those. The New Testament is a historical document, that type of thing, with myth, a little bit of myths in there, but it's mostly, we can trust it as historical takes. That's one of the pillars that you find. And the other one is dating the Old Testament all the way back to like 1000 BCE. You have a force in academia going in that direction, despite all the evidence.
I mean, it's only the most deeply embedded and ingrained in widespread religions of the last 1700 years. So, of course, there's going to be huge incentives and motives and forces to try to keep all of that stuff from being exposed and being questioned.
Yeah.
I see Need More Amalek in the chat. He sent me some stuff about how you always hear scholars saying that Luke was a Gentile, and I think he read a book or followed us, was studying a scholar about that. and that the arguments that they make to say he was a Gentile are also really ridiculous as well, and that it's a good chance it wasn't written by a Gentile.
Yeah, I think Luke is no different, well, not much different than like Mark or John. What you're getting is, so I don't know, you know who Tiberius Julius Alexander is? He was one of the generals.
Titus.
Yeah. He was he was a half Jew, half Egyptian.
Philo's nephew.
Philo's nephew, yes. The nephew of Philo, the great philosopher, Jewish philosopher. Anyways, this guy was fighting against the Jews in the war in 70 AD. He was standing there watching the destruction of his people's temple and was like, yeah, cheering it on. Like, this is the type of Jewish, Greek-speaking Jewish people that became Christianity. They claim Israel descent. They're proud of that. I'm Israel all day long, but they're like, I don't care about the temple. I care about
the Essenes were celebrating I think Pompey taking the temple as well. Taking Jerusalem. They hated the temple and the Jewish establishment as well.
It's like when you go to Brooklyn, the Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn who are railing against Zionism. Like, what the hell? You ever see those demonstrations?
Yeah.
Yep. That's what it's like. But so like Christians were like that. They were Hellenistic. They were Greek speaking. They liked the philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras. That's why you find the sentences of Pythagoras found in the Nag Hammadi collection. They found Pythagorean works, Platonist works. Plato's Republic was there, among other Christian texts. But they can't stand like Jewish custom or the laws of Moses or circumcision and all this dorky stuff. I can't stand you. Pharisees are weird. That's the type of Jew that became Christianity. Yep. That's really what it is.
So before we get into some of the topics and material today, I wanted to share, you got a big trip coming up that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. And you guys may have seen online, there's this new Greek temple being built in Greece, but then apparently the Greek Orthodox Church got their panties in a bunch and tried to get the guy arrested and try to stop this little temple from being built. That's how threatened they are. Yeah,
they got him arrested. Yeah, he's on bail right now. I'm going to meet him while he's on bail. I'm going to do an interview right there and right where that guy's standing. I'm going to be right there. That's in Arcadia. That's where that's the Temple of Pan. So that's the image of the devil. If you guys don't know, Pan is that goat-legged, shaggy, horned, demon-looking character. Well, they built a temple to him, Pan. So you can see the Orthodox Church that has a really good foothold in the government there. They did not like that at all, and they went after this guy. Bexis is his name, and they shut his temple down. They arrested him. So I'm going to go talk to him, and I'm going to interview him and make a documentary about it.
It's going to be really cool. This makes me want to try to build a temple somewhere around here in the United States and watch the Christians get mad.
We should.
It's like this is the thing the other day. I think it was in Texas. There was like some Satanist was there doing some weird satanic thing, and the Christians showed up and they got in a fight. Like I think that's LARPy, and that's just reinforcing Christians and playing into the Judeo paradigm. But to put up, I always say this, like proud idolater. Put up the pre-Christian idols, the temples.
That's why I'll say Hail Satan, because not that I believe in your Satan, that I don't think there's your Satan actually exists, but I'll say it because that's how much I don't believe in your Jewish myths at all.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. I think
when you say Messiah, when you say we need the Messiah to save us from sins, brain does not compute. All of that is jargon nonsense. Sin is not a thing that's made up, and an anointed of God is not a thing it's made up. These don't matter outside of Judeo-Christianity.
Why I disagree with saying that, well, number one, I don't believe it. I don't believe it's real, and I think it just reinforces their belief in Jesus and the Bible. When you say when they see anybody at MTV Music Awards doing anything with devil horns, it just they have the satanic panic. A lot of people believe in Jesus and go to church because they think that people out there worship the devil.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy.
It's like he's the boogeyman to scare people into believing in Jesus. So that's why I think any playing into it, although even if people are just doing it to trigger the Christians, I think the better way to trigger them is to just go pagan, pre-Christian stuff.
Right. Exactly. And but that's what paganism is, Satan, in a way, because a Satan in Hebrew, Satana means to oppose or to like judge.
Yeah,
to be adversarial. And so to be adversarial to Christianity would be going back to the old gods, to the daimons, and worship and worship the gods. That's the most adversarial you can be to Christianity.
Yeah, like the beast and the Antichrist in Revelation is basically like the Romans and the Greeks.
Exactly.
So you're gonna go interview this guy. I saw he has another interview up, but it's in Greek, I guess. Founder of the Temple of Pan, arrested. How did they get him arrested?
Look at so this is what so I actually got a hold of
this guy. Did it, huh?
This guy was behind pulling all the strings.
The Bene Jesuits did it again.
Look what he said. Look what they quote him right there. This specific action attempts to restore practices and perceptions of a religiosity of bygone eras. Causes of sadness. He's seething. Passions and demonic works. Yeah. Bro, it's like they built your society, dude. You're the reason you exist is because of the Greeks. Christianity would never exist without the Greeks. And he's like pissed at his parents because he's too spoiled.
It reminds me of this this rabbi. I think I sent you this, right? Here, let me see if I can. God, with this StreamYard, I'm a little clumsier. Let me share screen, audio. Watch this one. Just like this rabbi celebrating the Christians and the Muslims.
Yeah, this pissed me off when I saw this. This
pissed me off too.
I wish I was there when this happened.
You should go to the same spot and rededicate it to Athena.
I will.
This place was built in honor of the goddess Athena, and there was a golden ivory statue here, and it's destroyed. It was destroyed by the Ottoman Empire. It's no longer here. It's completely uprooted. Now, those who served Avodah Zarah here thought this place would last forever. They thought they would worship idolatry here forever. But the reason it's not here is because of Klal Yisrael. You say, what? Because of Klal Yisrael? We didn't destroy it. We did destroy it. How's that? It's through the influence of Klal Yisrael. The Rambam writes that the reason why Hashem created the religions of the world, Christianity and Islam, is so that the Jewish view of monotheism should be able to spread to the whole world. So be through Jewish influence, belief in monotheism, that then filtered down through world religion, namely Ottoman Empire, this place was destroyed. So they thought they would serve Avodah Zarah here forever, and because of Am Yisrael, it was destroyed. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu uprooted Avodah Zarah.
So literally celebrating the Christians and the Muslims, destroying all of the non-Abrahamic worship.
I mean, that's like we can go to that's like us going to the Wailing Wall and being like, look what the Romans did to these guys. Their whole temple's gone. Because it is. There's no different. You're not on a better situation than anyone else. Wow, you got Israel back. Wow, good for you. You know, it's like Greece is still there too. Rome is still there too. We still exist. Humans still exist. As long as humans still exist, the ancestral customs still exist. There's no way around that. Well, it's just a matter of people picking it back up again. Didn't die. No one killed it. It's still alive and well, waiting for people to just come along and pick it up. That's it. Which is going to happen.
Oh, shoot. Here, I want to turn this down. They're talking in Greek. It amazes me that this Greek Orthodox priest is so seething. How did they get him arrested, though? They have enough pull that they can arrest him for...
They clocked him on the way he built his temple wasn't up to standard. He did it under the rules and guidelines of a shed where you like store your equipment, right? So it was what he's basically building a shed, but it's a temple. And they were like, nope, regulation 5211 says this. And they clocked his ass on some regulation shit.
Dude, they threw the book at him.
They threw they did it through the judicial. You know what I mean? That's one way. That's why like Catholics and Orthodox Jews are big into law, because that's how they get power, through the law, by suing and doing counter defamation stuff. Like they do all types of shit in the courts to get their way. You know what I mean? And we're just seeing a petty example of that right here. That's what that is.
Well, If we wanna oppose Yahweh, I guess this is what we got to do. We got to build some sheds. Build some sheds and erect some idols.
Exactly. What's wrong with that? Honor your ancestors.
Yahweh hates it.
Isn't it funny? People you'll see people on Twitter that'll be like, I honor my ancestors by being a good Christian because that Christianity is such a white nationalist thing. It's like that was all filled with a bunch of jargon that made no sense because Christianity is universalist. That's why it's called Catholic Church. No, there's no Jew, there's no Gentile, no Greek, no male, no female. We're all equal under Christ. There's no slave and no master. There's no such thing as any of that earthly stuff. And then you're saying people that is how you honor your ancestors? Like, no. Honor your ancestors would be ancestral customs, not Christianity.
Christianity destroyed the ancient culture and literature and architecture and history.
Do you even know how bad it was? There was a fire called the Temple of Vesta, where the fire was lit. Fire of Vesta. Guess how long it was lit for? When the Christian Theodosius in 395 shut it down. Guess how long it had been lit for? 1,000 years.
Oh,
they had a 1,000-year lit fire that the ancestors were constantly kept lit for 1,000 years, from 750 BC at the time of supposedly Romulus, all the way up until that 395 AD. The Temple of Vesta was lit, and they smothered that shit. The Christians did, and guess what happened to Rome after that? Rome fell within half of a century.
And they say that then they built Western civilization when
they destroyed it.
And much of Western civilization's rooted in Greco-Roman world and paganism.
And when that happened, when he did extinguish the fire of Vesta and shut down the Olympics and close down all the temples of the ancient mysteries and shut down libraries, when they did all that stuff, at that point in time, their Christians only made up 5 to 10, maybe 25% at higher estimates of the empire, which means the majority of the people were still pagan, and paganism didn't lose out. Your ancestors didn't convert because of how great Christianity was. They were socially forced to become Christians, and slowly over generations, over 3 or 4 generations, they were so forced out of their old ways because they couldn't do any worship things anymore. It was illegal. They're all just became Christians.
It was socially like forced. A fringe mob. Did you ever watch Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
You know how there was that religious group with like the stars carved in their foreheads?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously based on the Christians and what they did.
Fundamentalists.
The way they were behaving.
Yeah, they shut down. They knocked down the idols of the gods that were sitting there for 500, 600 years by these great epic sculptors. We even know their names, and all these famous symbols of our past destroyed. Sometimes it was Christians against other Christians, or in the 13th century when the Latins sacked Constantinople, and then they destroyed all the artwork in Constantinople and melted it down for gold. And we lost all of our past because of that.
Have you done this one yet? Darkening Age?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I thought I already hated Christians until I read this, and then I realized how we need to hate them even more.
And people who criticize that book don't actually understand, because the Dark Ages, if we're talking about a really, really dark period of time that no one denies, you have your periods between the late 5th and the early 10th century. So there's like a good 5 centuries where writing and poetry and epic mythologies are just completely dead. There's no more classics being written. Even what's his name? One of these early historians. I'm trying to think of his name. Gregory of Tours. That's who it is. Gregory of Tours in the 7th century was writing about, he was literally lamenting, how come what a horrible period this is. This is a Christian saying this. He's going, what a horrible period this is. No one knows how to read or write anymore. I'm the only one who can do it, he's saying. He's like, complaining about how educated people used to be, and all of a sudden in the 7th century, no one's educated anymore. No one has any time for, like, there was like this in the pre-Christian world. You get the pre-Socratics, the Platonists, the Pythagoreans. There's Stoics, there's the Epicureans. They're all like in their own philosophical angles, going at it, duking it out. And there was competing ideas, and it made for growth, made for competition in the marketplace of ideas. Whereas when you have one idea that everyone has to believe or you're going to burn in hell, that's dogma. That literally quenches, it retards. It's a retardation of society.
St. John Chrysostom gloated that the writings of the Greeks had been obliterated. Imagine celebrating that. I got another one too, the dark side of Christian history as well. And people will deny, and then they'll gaslight and deny the Dark Ages. They'll say, actually, science and education and the Western world's all built by Christianity.
Right.
And we would be nothing, and we would have no morals without the Bible.
Right.
And
there were just a bunch of orgiastic, cannibalistic barbarians before Christianity came along. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. The same ideas of piety, the same ideas of being a God-fearing, good citizen. You find this in the ancient pagan writers like the Pythagoreans and some of these Middle Platonist writers, some of these Stoic writers. You get the same ideas of pietists. They didn't introduce any of that stuff to anything. In fact, what made the Renaissance so great, because I admit the Renaissance was great. I'm not like a Gibbon historian that thinks things got better because of the Enlightenment. No, I think things were getting better under the Renaissance because they were willing to go back to the Greeks, because they were willing to go outside of Christianity. They said, no more of this iconoclasm, death of art thing. Let's open up the arts. Let's build idols again. Let's draw Bacchus and Aphrodite, go back to Homer and paint those classics out and make new sculptures. That's what the Renaissance was. That's why it's called a rebirth, not a new birth, a rebirth. And that was what they were doing. They were going, even Dante, it invokes the music.
Sorry, dude. Sorry, hold on.
You're good.
I never done that before. I pulled up a video file through StreamYard. Go ahead. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, even Dante, one of these great Christian poets from the late 13th century, I think it is, even he invokes the muses. That's such it's a pagan. That's paganism. He's invoking the muses in his writings. He's shouting out some of the gods and everything, all types of, that's what made the Renaissance so good, is they got away from Christianity. Christianity didn't do anything to give us the Renaissance.
No, they'll be like, oh, we couldn't have built these nice buildings without the Bible, as if the Bible teaches anything about architecture or instructs anything about building churches. As
if these people have never seen Helicarnassus before, or like the depictions of Helicarnassus where they had this one of the wonders of the world was there. This giant, basically a tower, like a skyscraper back. There's building architecture in the ancient world, Corinthian columns, Ionic columns, Doric columns, some of the most perfect mathematically aligned temples, and how they built these structures with giant marble and beautiful artworks on them. That's all that stuff gets dead in the Middle Ages. Everyone's living in like barns and shacks and like beat up little old castles from centuries that are centuries old. That's not, then it started like this idea that they started building all these great things. I mean, look, Gothic architecture is pretty good. I'm not going to lie, but like the Greeks had shit figured out.
Yeah. And nobody else, it was the only game in town. There was no other big empires with the resources to build those things. Because Christianity took over, it was imposed over so much of the world. There was no other places to be building these things. The only game in town.
Yeah. And it's a monopoly of the culture.
You talked about the pagan barbarians. Watch this one real quick.
Meaning, they're allowed to believe in God even if they...
Oops,
Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and he said he was successful. He uprooted pagan idolatry and pagan immorality from the Gentile culture, and he says, look at the positive revolution he created. For the Jews, he said, don't touch Torah. For the Gentile world, he took them away from barbaric paganism, and he made them embrace the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which are the basic moral codes known as the 7 Noachide laws that God gave the Adam and the Bnei Noach for all of humanity. And
So there you go. A rabbi bragging about Jesus bringing morals to the barbaric pagans and getting them to be Noahides.
Yeah, and if you look at what's so interesting about like Theodosius, Constantine, and Justinian, and those three, because they were writing all these law codes and stuff, and the way they reshaped the world from its former Greco-Roman setup is all of a sudden the way they set up, because they still had a Senate in Rome and Constantinople. The Senate was basically there to convene on matters, vote on things, and they would guide the emperor. It would be like the Senate is, the better of an emperor, the more they listen to the Senate. The worst of an emperor, the less they listen to a Senate. It's like a common trope in historians. But anyways, Jews were allowed to take up seats in the Senate. They had like their own reserved. Jews had governmental powers that pagans didn't even have. So the religions of the ancestors of the Greeks and the Romans have no power anymore. And there's no representatives in Senate seats, nothing like that. They're not nobles in any houses anymore. They're all farmers. That's why they're called pagans, because they're like Hicks now. They're all just farmer class people. They're completely driven out of high-end society. And by the time you get to Justinian in the 6th century, even though the Jews have written laws that are directed at them, like there's like death penalty for any Jew who commits circumcision on a non-Jew, something like that. There's like laws like that. But then all of a sudden you look at other laws that are like the Jews are allowed to sit in this seat in the Senate, this blah, 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 blah. They can do this. They can convene in this. They can do this. They can
have their synagogues. They shut down the pagan temples, but they protected the synagogues.
Pagan temples are gone. The synagogues are up.
Mm-hmm.
That's so when you look at the reality of that is like, even though people will go, Christians were so brutal to Jews for so long, and it's true, there's like that enemy thing going on between Christians.
They were satanic antichrists, but so was all the pagans and Gentiles of the world. If they didn't believe in Jesus, they were also considered satanic.
As much as the society was sort of set up where you have Jews in one corner living their separate, segregated world between the Christians, pagans aren't even on the table anymore. They're living in they're living in the underground and in the way out of the cities, and like they're not even part of the scene anymore. They have nothing. Jews are higher up in society than pagans are, just like that.
I forgot to tell you, just got a new book. I'm really excited about it. The Jewish Jesus by Peter Schaefer, How Judaism and Christianity Shaped Each Other. You heard anything about that one?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I heard about, I know about this. It's true. And it's spot on. They both sort of come out of the same tradition in a weird way, like that Hellenistic, Alexandrian, Philonic type of Judaism is where you get Christianity, and then what we would call rabbinic Judaism is like Pharisaic people that lived past the temple falling and sort of reconvening their ideas for a post-temple religion, which is what you get Talmuds and debates and the Mishnah versus the Gemara and that type of duality thing. What was I getting at? I forgot why I brought that up, but yeah, you get the point.
These Christians too, like talking about that, they tell us online, like, stop criticizing Christianity. We got to work together. We got to unite to save America or save Western civilization. Right? We hear this all the time. Well, watch this. They say this all the time, but then, where is it? There it is. How can we ally with people like this that aren't even concerned about saving America or Western civilization? They just care about the church. And their prophecies even say that America might be destroyed, just like the rabbis, just like John Hagee. Right. Check this one out.
He said, you got to quit worrying about saving the empire, saving the West, saving America. He's like,
hold on. By the way, he's saying, who is he is telling him this? It's his Russian Orthodox Church father is who told him this.
He said, you got to quit worrying about saving the empire, saving the West, saving America. He's like, empires come and go, and the church has been here throughout time.
Right.
And so don't be so concerned with how to politically save this country, because it's not going to happen.
Right. That's a true Christian right there.
Don't even try to fix things.
That is the true mindset. The higher up you get in these churches, like on the bottom, these internet people representing the church that are like super right-wing conservative types trying to, like, you know, make Christianity into their own image type thing. But when you look at, like, in the church itself, the higher ups, the bishops, the patriarchs, the
Pope,
they're mostly international, liberal, like very centrist. You know what I mean? And not worrying about national, very much the opposite of nationalism, because they're internationalists.
Yeah.
The church is international.
International Jesus messianism.
Yeah, the Constantinople, if it falls, whatever, we'll just go to Moscow. We'll set up there. This is what happened with the Orthodox Church. That's how you get the Russian Orthodox Church. It's a continuation of the old Byzantine Church, you know, in some ways.
Yeah, the higher up, all the churches, the higher up the leadership in politics or in religion, and the more,
it's the
more liberal, the more diverse, pro diversity, the more pro Israel, the more all of that stuff.
And it's go ahead.
The Pope has been. This might be the last Pope, or the Pope might be out real soon. He's been in the hospital. He's looking rough.
Yeah, he's done. Once you need oxygen like that, you're naturally you're supposed to be going right now. You're holding on you're holding on too long. What are you waiting for? Aren't you going to heaven?
Nope.
Aren't you? What, are you scared to go to heaven?
No, Pope is satanic.
No, I got more work to do. Yeah, okay. You're scared.
So do you want to, let's see, we talked about the Greek. I know you have a video that you wanted to play and talk about.
Yeah, I want to respond to this, or do a reaction, actually, if you will, to this clip. And I have some screenshots of people who are I'm going to show it in a second. But.
Oh, that reminds me, I got to pull something up too of the Greek. But yeah, let's show that. Is it up? Let's see.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a pretty known fact that the Jews are God's chosen people, that the Jewish homeland is Israel, that the Jews believe in the Old Testament, and that the Old Testament is about Jews. However, almost none of these facts are true. Nowhere in the Bible does.
Look, he just asserts this. Now that is a bold claim right there. You better be able to back this up somehow. There must be something we're all seeing that we're all missing that you see. Like, this is nonsense. You better be able to back this claim up. Watch how little he backs this up.
Does it call the Jews God's chosen people? Modern day Israel isn't really the homeland of the Jews. The Jews don't really believe in the Old Testament, and only maybe 5% of the people in the Old Testament.
Okay, that's nonsense, because the Tanakh is the Old Testament.
It's funny that I watch all these rabbi videos.
That's all they believe in. They don't believe in anything but the Old Testament.
It's the most important book, their whole identity, the history, their fake history, all of it. And then you're going to get up here and say they don't believe in the Old Testament.
By the way, the Talmud is not mythology or like epics.
There is.
Talmud,
some of it is. Yeah.
No, but I know there's a bunch of like stuff like that. But what I'm saying is it's mostly commentary on the Old Testament. Most of the Talmud is something commentary on something in Genesis, on something in Leviticus, on something in the Numbers. Throughout the whole Talmud, you cannot have a Talmud without the Old Testament. So you can't. You can only take the Talmud away if you're going to judge Jewish doctrine. You cannot take the Old Testament away. That's the roots of it all. Because with the Torah is the first 5 books of the Tanakh, right? And then the Tanakh is the greater Old Testament altogether with Proverbs and everything. It's just completely wrong what he just said right there.
Yeah, like their favorite person in Judaism is arguably Moses, who supposedly wrote the Torah. But no, they don't believe the Old Testament. They don't even believe in Moses. And ignore the fact that whenever you watch all these rabbis all over YouTube, like me and my guys have done, they're talking about the Torah nonstop. All of their things are called Torah this, Torah that. No, actually, they don't believe in the Torah.
They don't believe it, right?
Kookiest shit ever.
About? Just makes that up. And it's like, let's just keep going.
Testament can even be considered Jewish. So now that you've branded me an anti-Semite, we can begin. So the expression anti-Semite literally means against Shem or his descendants. However, being anti-Jewish isn't the same as being
Why'd they make Shem look like me?
I don't know. That is weird. Why did they make him like that? Because that's not how he's supposed to look. Shem is, he's supposed to be representing like the
people that live in the desert in the Middle East.
Afro-Asiatic Semites. You know what I mean? Anyways,
let me explain. The Semites are the descendants of a man named Shem, who would father some of the world's most renowned empires and dynasties, such as the Assyrian and Babylonian empires, and even the Persians can call them.
No, the Persians are not Semitic. The Persians are Indo-Europeans. The Babylonians and the Assyrians adopted Semitic languages, but even they're mostly are native Mesopotamians. Now, what he just said was completely nonsense. He pulled out of his ass. The Semites do not make up Persians. So,
or Babylonians or Assyrians, and Shem is from Noah's Ark story, which is copied from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Shem is a literary construction of Jews that were trying to make sense of why is there three major races. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably what it was.
And it would be Japheth would be the one with the blonde hair, not Shem. If you're really going to go that route. This is just nonsense.
Is there any ancient inscription of Babylon or Assyria that talks about Shem is their progenitor?
Never. Zero. Nothing. Shem's not even mentioned by anyone until the 3rd century BC.
This is the stupidest video that I never even wanted to play it because it's just so ridiculous.
It's so bad.
But the Christians will share this on the internet and it'll get like 20,000 likes. They're the biggest lying copers that don't care at all. They love being fed lies and being duped and believing insane shit.
It's nonsense.
Semites. So why is it when you say something against the Jews, you are considered anti-Semitic? Because just like stealing your religion, your homes, your money, and businesses, some Jews also love stealing names, inheritance, and land.
That just made no sense at all.
Yeah. As this guy, this guy's Jewish, by the way, that made this, but as the white people that try to say they're the true Israelites, you're literally trying, or the Christians that say you're the new Israel, or you have the covenant and you have the circumcised hearts now, like you're the ones trying to steal the inheritance. It's so stupid. It's like, so the Gauls and the Celts and all the Vikings in Scandinavia, like, they know nothing about being the ancient tribes of Israel. They don't have any of the same languages. They don't have any of these stories that you see. They don't know they forgot who they were. They just forgot who they were and became pagans and started worshiping pagan gods. And then somebody came in, these Edomites came in and stole our chosen status. And now they say that they're the Jews and they're the chosen people. And we forgot who they are and they stole our identity. It's the stupidest thing imaginable.
It makes no sense. It really does. It's just completely nonsense.
So Shem is the son of Noah, the guy who built the ark when Mesopotamia flooded. The Sumerian kingdom would be destroyed by the flood, and the Semites would descend from the Caucasian mountains and establish the Akkadian Empire.
That's not what happened at all. That is not what happened. They didn't. No. Okay.
Shem would have children, and one of his descendants would be named Eber. He would be the father of the Hebrew people, and the Semites would be called by his name. Eber's line would eventually give birth to a man named Abram or a Jew named Abraham, except Abraham has never been a Jew, nor will he ever be a Jew. And
this is true so far that Abraham's not technically a Jew. But watch how...
Abraham never existed either.
Abraham never existed. But if he did, if the genealogy was right, Abraham would be pre-Jewish.
When the story was made up about Abraham, they didn't refer to him as a Judean because Judah didn't exist.
Because Judah was not a real son yet, or he never was. But in the story, I'm saying, until you get to Judah, then the kingdom. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's let him play.
Even rabbis argue about who the first Jew was. Who could they consider the first Jew? A lot of them do say it's Abraham because it's the Abrahamic covenant,
right?
And
it might as well be because it's all made up anyway. So
right.
Might as well just call it Abraham. Who cares? It's nonsense.
Is just plain ignorant. So let's go through it. So, according to the Bible, Abraham was a Hebrew and not a Jew, who God promised would be the father of many.
Now, this is presupposing that Jews existed before Abraham. Because notice how he goes, oh, he's not a Jew. As if Jew was already a category in Abraham's time. It's not a category in Abraham's time. So why would that even have... It's just nonsense what he's doing. It's almost like pointless.
Okay. We can go one way. We can say, okay, technically Abraham wasn't a Jew, but the Jews are technically the descendants of Abraham because they're one of the 12 tribes of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah.
The only remaining, if you believe the story, the only remaining known descendants of the Hebrews or the Israelites would be
Judah
the
and
Jews
Benjamin.
and the Judeans.
Yeah. They say it's Judah and Benjamin. And that's a nonsense. There's only... Okay, so... This is a good time for me to pull up my slide that I wanted, I got a slide. I think it's a slide. 1 second. Oh, yeah. Right here. All right. So this is the 12 tribes map. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
This is made up. This never existed. There are no primary sources from the time period that ever mentions the land of Manasseh, the land of Asher, the land of Gad, the land of Reuben. Never. The only thing we have in the sources is this Kingdom of Israel, or sometimes called Samaria or Jezreel, and some depending on what time period we're in. And the Galilee wasn't originally a part of the Kingdom of Israel until later as part of the Phoenician lands. However, the Kingdom of Judah has always been in the south. It's always been two kingdoms, Samaria or Israel and Judah. The Kingdom of Judah is where Jerusalem is. All right. So check this out. There's two. That's it. That's all you have. There's no 12 tribes. Look at this. Look at this idiot right here. I don't know. I put this in here. This is a little off topic, but like these people are putting quotes on the screen, and then they're getting checked. This is a fake quote that Tom Holland never said. Like, what are you doing? How do you not take this down?
Christians love faking quotes.
Yeah,
and taking quotes out of context on purpose.
And they don't care. He's not going to take it down. He's just going to leave it up there. What an idiot. All right. Anyways.
Yeah. They're like, they'll be like, you believe Jewish community notes? That's what they'll say.
Right. It's not the myth, though. Not the mythology. Not the stories. Not the fabricated lies. Anyways.
You believe in evolution. You believe in Jewish science. Like, you need to believe in Genesis. That's not Jewish. It's Hebrew.
Yeah. Right. It wasn't written by Jews. All right. This person right here writes, Jews are not Israelites. They and Arabs are Canaanites, which means, by the way, Israelites and Judahites are all Canaanites.
Yeah.
So Canaan, it doesn't, so you're still, it's just, this is like the brains have fallen out of their skulls type shit. How dumb this is.
Yeah, and do any church fathers or does anywhere in the Bible it say the Jews are not Israelites? Never.
No, never.
They act like it's some huge scandal, some huge conspiracy, and there's like no proof of it at all. Was Herod a convert that had some what is it, Iudean or it's Edomite blood?
Idumean.
Yes.
Yeah,
does that mean that all of the Jews in Judah were flipped and not Jews anymore just because one person was?
It's
obviously
nonsense.
not.
And the Jews were never pure race stock anyway.
Right.
That whole area was always metropolitan and mixing between Persians and Egyptians and Phoenicians and Greeks. They
were Canaanites.
Yeah,
there was no Exodus.
The original Hebrews were just bands of wandering nomads, and they were from all over the place. They were already mixing. They became Jews by mixing. That's what the Jews are. Like, isn't that ironic? But look at this. Look at all these nonsense. Look at, in case you missed it, Jews are not the Judeans of the Old Testament. Until 1000 after Christ, their holy book was only the Talmud. You're telling me that Until 1000 AD, Jews never had the Old Testament, only the Talmud. This is like, there's making shit up at this point.
You're overrun by retards on
This-
Twitter and on the internet.
And people will actually believe this. Here's another one. This is why I reject the Old Testament, what the Jews call the Torah, man-made rules and regulation. Yeshua didn't teach that. The 10 Commandments is what we need to follow. By the way, what do you think the 10 Commandments came from? Came from the Torah, dummy. The rest was made by the Jews. They will kill those who love Yeshua. Why are you saying his name in Hebrew if you don't like the Jews? Why don't you call him Jesus in Greek?
Rabbi Yeshua.
Why are you calling him Yeshua? Hypocrites, but that is not terror. This is like
Terrorism.
these people are so confused. Look at this one. Old Testament about Jews? Nope. Most people in the Old Testament aren't Jewish. Moses, an Israelite. Got him. Not from Judah. Paul, from Benjamin, not a Jew. The Bible covers Semites, Hebrews, Israelites, and more, not just Jews. Now, what's so funny about this is under his own logic of characterizing Paul as a Benjaminite, Jesus, who's from the line of David, is literally a Judahite. Because if you're from the line of David, you're from the line of Judah. So under his own definition, Jesus is a Jew.
Is a Jew, right?
And
This one's the worst. These are literally the same thing, just with an extra step added in.
Right.
And just zoom on the bottom, the reality, the Jew to the Jesus, and then they go like, this proves Jesus isn't Jewish or something. But you look at that,
just made up Old Testament Judaism. Look at this Chad right here. New Testament, and then born again Christianity. That's how it works. All this other stuff is all just made up. This is crazy. People
it's
are
the same
so
thing, just
delusional.
with an extra step added in the middle.
Right? Yeah.
Changes nothing.
It's nonsense. It's not true at all. It's completely made up.
And it shows them branching together. They want to deny that like they're Judeo-Christian and what that means, that like it's the king of Judah, it's like Judaism from Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah. Jesus is the seed of David, who was the king of Judah, but then they want to deny that it's Judeo-Christian.
That's what I'm about to show all the primary sources in a second. And like they remind me of modern day Marcionites, and they don't even realize it. Their hatred for all things Jewish, but also wanting to be Jewish and Christian at the same time. They're like that psychology, the psychology of Marcion. I just realized recently how necessary that was in early Christianity. It's how you get this whole paradigm to work. It's how you get Gentiles to become Jewish.
It's like a cope. If you see the evil God of the Old Testament and you go, oh, I don't want anything to do with that, and these rabbinical Jews over here. So you try to cope and say, oh, it's actually a different God, and Jesus wasn't Jewish, and wasn't Marcionite Jewish? Marcion.
They think he's from Asia Minor.
That doesn't mean he's not Jewish, though. Even in Marcion's Bible,
his father, I think was. I think they said his father was actually, or his mother wasn't, or something like that. That's what I heard. Which would make him not a Jew under law because you have to be born from your mother. But I think his father was. I think that was what his situation was. Anyways, Rachel Wilson writes here, I'm sorry about your father's accident, but we do not worship the same God. Nero worships the one true triune God. You worship the Jewish God. So you can stop with all this who's bringing more people to God stuff. I'm sorry, Rachel, but this is nonsense.
Paul in Romans literally says it's the God. Is it the God of the Jews only? No, it's the God of the Gentiles too. So it's like you clear the Gentiles are worshiping the Jewish God. And
it's the God of Abraham. If the God of Abraham, so if you ask a Christian, how many gods did Abraham worship? He worshiped one God. So there's one God of Abraham. Yes. So if these two religions both claim to be worshiping the God of Abraham, which you just said there's only one of, then they worship the same God. That was basic logic. If there's one God of Abraham, if a God says, if a person says, I worship the God of Abraham, then you worship the same exact God. Whether you write it in Greek and you change the stories up and make it different laws and different regulations, that's all secondary compared to that God is still the God of Abraham. It's still Yahweh.
And the most ridiculous part about this is Rachel Wilson adores Jay Dyer. She loves Jay Dyer.
Yeah.
And my buddy C. All has compilations of Jay Dyer saying over and over again, the Gentiles worshiping the Jewish God, the Gentiles worshiping the Jewish Messiah.
And it's like even quoting from Jesus saying like, I will not drop one eye or one tittle from the law of Moses. Like they are not just ripping off their Old Testament and saying we have a new covenant, forget about the old. No, they're still holding on to it. They're just maneuvering around it a little bit as much as they can. But it's still Judeo-Christian is the best way to describe what it is.
Yeah, and if you're trying to play semantics and say like, well, the Jews don't believe in the Trinity and they don't believe Jesus is God, it's like, yeah, no duh. Nobody's claiming they did. The point is, in the Trinity, the Father is the God of the Old Testament, which is who the Jews believe in. And that's why the Christians have to cope and lie and say that the Jews secretly worship Satan, even though there's no proof of that at all. And the only evidence they provide are fake quotes, fake actor rabbi hoaxes, and obviously taken out of context rabbis talking about the role of Satan in Judaism.
And it's like, then if you're going to argue that the Old Testament that you have in your church, your Septuagint that you get, your Greek version of the Bible, is the original or is like your holy scriptures, and in those texts you have to sort of ad hoc or sort of post hoc, I should say, go back and just imagine the Trinity wherever in all the places that you just want to force it in. So like the angel of the Lord, that's Jesus now because he's part of this Trinity. So they have to they go back to the Old Testament and they reshape it based on their newer model. But like you're still appealing to those scriptures that the Jews wrote. You can't get out of it. There's no way around it. You know?
Yeah, Trinity's not even in the Bible. They have to try to shoehorn it in there and claim
it's not even in the Bible. Exactly.
It's illogical. It's the same essence, but it's different. It's the same thing, but it's also different and separate. It's just like, dude, you're just pill pulling like a rabbi on the Sabbath. Yeah.
Now check this out. This is from Maccabees. People said that another thing I noticed in these types of people, they'll say the word Jew it was invented after Christianity. Mm-hmm. There were Israelites before that. It's like, no, this is nonsense. This is from 1st century BC, 2nd century, yes, 1st and 2nd century BCE, and it says it right here. We the Jews, it uses Judaios, Jews, the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as faithful servants. We the Jews wrote to you in extremity. The Jews that are throughout Egypt, health and peace. They already use this term for all Israelites. It's synonymous.
Yeah, I'll debate these guys, and they'll say, "No, it's not the Jewish God." And I'll say, "Yeah, it is. It was only people known as Jews for hundreds of years worshiping this God. The only people that worship this God were known as Jews before Christianity."
Exactly. There wasn't. This wasn't something that came later. The Jews were always there. They always called themselves Jews. They never called themselves Ephraim or Gad or any of the 12 tribe names. They call themselves Jews. And like over time, people in the northern realms, Israelites, started calling themselves Jews too. Everyone started calling themselves Jews after a while.
You know, I forgot where I read it. I think it's in the Mythmaker, but about like Paul claiming to be from the tribe of Benjamin. Like,
yeah,
that has some like theological significance as well, and it has some deep meaning. It wasn't authentic.
King Saul was a Benjaminite.
There you go.
He matches up the mimesis.
Have you heard the cope from Christians online? They'll say that hold on, is my mic working okay? Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay, somebody complained about
I can hear you.
I was using a different mic. They'll say Jews didn't exist until the 1700s because the letter J didn't exist. Have you seen that one? I'm sure you've seen it.
I'm showing on the screen right now. In English, it says Jews. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the damn Greek or Hebrew, Judaios, there's no J. You don't need to add a J. You're adding a J later. Mm-hmm. So when you go back, you can still have the word Jew there, but it's with an iota, Judaios. And look over here. Yehudi. So you got Yehudi, you got Judios, and then Jew. That's it. It's that simple. And this is from
they'll
Second
say
Kings.
the Jews killed Jesus, but then Jesus is not a Jew, or they'll say it's the same Greek word.
Right,
The
that's
New
what I'm saying.
Testament uses the same Greek word for saying the Jews killed Jesus, as it says
This
that Jesus is born the King of the Jews, or salvation is
Yes.
of the Jews.
He literally called the King of the Jews, exactly. And then look, Judios is the word they use that drove out the Jews. Here we go again. Watch this. Once again, you have book of Jeremiah, way back, way deep into the Old Testament. What does Jeremiah say? Before all the Jews that sat in the court of the prison, Judion, same word, or Yehudi in Hebrew. So this word, it was already synonymous with Israelite all the way back in the time of Jeremiah. Here's from Luke, where it says Jesus, the son of, because this is the genealogy of Jesus. Math, which is the son of Matthias, son of Semi, the son of Joseph, the son of Judah. And there it is right there, Judah. So Jesus is a Judahite. This is another inscription from 250 BCE that mentions a man named Moschus Judios, or Moschus the Jew, or Judean. So they're being called Jews in 3rd century BCE. Here we go right here. King Hezekiah, king of Judah. See? King of Judah. That's what it means. So there's I think I gave enough evidence that the word Jew was already synonymous with all of Israelites centuries before the Gospels even were written.
And every single church father, when it talks about the Jews of the Bible of the New Testament, it never once says they're not Israelites or they're secret Edomites. There's not one time does it say that.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter to these lying Christians.
No.
Also, I got a couple real quick. In Matthew 2, it says, where is he the one that is born king of the Jews? Iudean.
Yeah. That's it. Judean. It says right there. It's in the sources. It's in your Bible. Jesus is a Jew, and he's from the line of Judah.
The same one from
you cannot get out of this unless you just deny reality. Christianity is Jewish.
They'll say, no, he wasn't Jewish, he was Judean, or he wasn't Judean, he was a Judahite. Like all of
that's what the word Judah comes from.
Yeah, it
comes from Judahite.
So the same one where it says that the Jews killed Jesus in First Thessalonians, same word. They're all the same word.
Yeah.
The synagogue of Satan declaring themselves Jews, Iudeus.
And
Iudean and Iudeus is just like different tenses, right? With how it's used.
One of them's that's the nominative case right there. That's your number one nominative, meaning the most. That's I am a Jew. And then the other one was accusative with an N at the end. So it's the same, it means the same thing. One of them means he's a Jew, another one means I'm a Jew. That's it. It just means Jew.
So salvation of the Jews killed Jesus.
Yeah.
They say they're Jews, but they're not. Jesus born the king of the Jews.
That's the genitive case right there. So of the Jews. So the only reason why there's an N at the end and not an S is because it's in the case of genitive of the Jews. The same word.
This has happened with so many debates with Christians. They'll say, no, Jesus never claimed to be king of the Jews. That's just what the Romans and the Jew put up above his head on the cross to taunt him, right? But no, actually, in the beginning of Matthew, it also says, where is the one born the king of the Jews?
And like I said before, you can look in this genealogy. He's from the Davidic line, which is from the line of Judah. David is a Judahite king, ruling from the kingdom of Judah. He's full-blooded. Jesus even born in Bethlehem, just like David is. Bethlehem is in Judah. Jesus is a Jew.
And that's the other code. They'll say, no, he's not. He was a Galilean. And the Galileans, there's a verse about the nations, Galilee of the nations. So that means he wasn't Jewish. Okay, so
that's like saying somebody who's 100% Indian, who he marries a 100% Indian wife, but they move to the United States, and the child is born in the United States. Is that person not Indian?
Exactly.
That's the same thing. Just because she's born in Galilee, his parents are both Judahites still. They're both from the line of David. It says it in the genealogy. It doesn't matter where he's born. He could have been born in Greece. Doesn't make him a Greek. He's still a Jewish person by ethnicity. No way around that.
I have a hard time believing there's so many low IQ coping Christians online that just eat this stuff up, or if it's because I don't want to get conspiratorial with you, but I know that there's intelligence agencies and people around the world that have bots all over the internet.
Yeah,
and
some of these people don't feel real.
They're too stupid to be real. So the only question is, if we know bots exist, we know they're botting things, what is being botted? And when I see this stuff explode, it makes me wonder, are they promoting all of this disinformation to keep everybody retarded? Same with the flat earth stuff. I always wondered the same thing about that too.
I think so. I think that because I think Christianity's growth, whether it be for Protestant churches or Catholic Orthodox, that is like good for a certain paradigm to thrive, which is like some scholars tell me, the reason why a lot of Christianity does get propped up in academia is because it's basically an issue of Israel, like survival. Is if they have support in the West, it's going to mostly come from Christians. So Christianity has to be on the table, and in order to have Christianity in the West, people need to believe in it. So it's like there's a circle that ends up getting into like, now you're supporting international framework, if that makes sense.
You'll see, especially e-Crusader internet Christians, they love John Chrysostom. He's the most hardcore based church father, right? They love to cite him. What does he say in the homilies on Romans? The Jews are Israelites indeed, but not according to the faith. So not even your most beloved based church father. Saint John Chrysostom is saying that the Jews are not Israelites. But I'm sure that whoever that person was on Twitter, you showed the screenshot of, I'm sure they know better than him, right?
Right.
It's kind of like the Christians will deny this book by Peter Schaeffer. He'll be the expert that they'll cite for Jesus in the Talmud, right? He had that famous book about Jesus in the Talmud. But the Jewish Jesus, how Christianity emerged from Judaism, they'll say, oh, that's disinfo. That's Jewish disinfo. That's what the Christians will say.
Right. Just anything they don't like is Jewish, except for the
including
things
including me.
Yeah. And then the things that aren't Jewish are.
Yeah. So Jesus, who's circumcised on the 8th day and called the King of the Jews, not Jewish, but the white guy.
They live in a backwards world. They do.
Complete inversion.
It's a complete upside down world. Everything that's Jewish is not Jewish. Everything that is Jewish isn't Jewish.
Pathological liars.
Right. Fascinating to watch.
Let's see, where are we at on time? Hour and 15. Okay, let's get to some of these super chats.
All right.
Liam Jarrett for 5 says, do you think that the Nazarenes were a sect of Judaism, and further that they came out of the Essenes as a proto-Christian phenomenon?
Yeah, I think it comes out of the world in between the Pharisees and the Essenes. So I think it's like not one or the other, but it's like somewhere in between, some sort of group that fell in between those two.
I remember Carrier cites some church father talking about that there was a bunch of different sects of Essenes too, that there wasn't a monolith of just one version of Essenes.
Yeah, that's what Josephus says. He says they were in every city. He says some of them stay out in the country, some of them like to live in the cities. They're all different, doing different things.
And the quote of Josephus about the Essenes that you told me about how they're like predicting the scriptures and doing prophecy and stuff, like totally.
That was they were known for going back to the Old Testament and then rewriting the Old Testament for new characters and new times. Which, if you think about it, that's what's going on in the Gospels.
Yep,
they're taking Old Testament motifs and they're rewriting it onto Jesus, and within a modern framework of the first century time period. They're just redoing. That's why it's literally New Testament's the perfect word to describe it. It's a new version of the same book. You know,
And the
Not-
Essenes were believed that there was writings in the Essene, the Qumran scrolls about a new covenant also.
New Covenant. They talk about this whole war between the sons of light and sons of darkness, like sort of dualism we find in Christianity. That sort of stuff's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's definitely some overlap for sure.
So much overlap. Immortal Owl says, is the name Paul a variant of the name Apollo?
It's a Latin word, that Paulus,
Mm.
and I think it means small, but I don't know. It could be related to Apollo.
There's something in the New Testament, like Paul talks about following like the Christ of Apollos or something like that. What is that verse?
Oh, there's a verse where Paul gets called. Oh no, he gets called Hermes. Never mind. Wait, which one are you talking about?
Let me try to look up real quick. Testament verse, Jesus of it's when Paul is talking about like other sects of other spirits and other Christianities that are not true.
Oh yeah.
1 Corinthians, where Paul addresses factions forming around the different teachers, implied as Christ as Apollos.
The one person's name is Apollos. Yeah.
For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not being merely human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigneth to each. I planted, Apollos water, but God gave the growth. That's the one. Oh, and then 1 Corinthians 1:12. What I mean is that each one of you says, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos, or I follow Cephas, or I follow Christ. That these are these apostles that were seeing Jesus in the scriptures and in their mystical visions. That's how I interpret that.
And Apollos was one of the 70 disciples, just like Marcion's mom, or dad now. But he was the one who gets credited for being the first bishop of Corinth. So that's why he might be in that letter to Paul to the Corinthians. But
okay,
anyways,
so I did ChatGPT. I said, so who is this Apollos in those verses? It says a Jewish Christian preacher who was well versed in the Hebrew scriptures, powerful in speech, and active in the Alexandrian and Pauline spheres of influence.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's one of these.
It talks about him in Acts too. Now, a Jew
it's
named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures.
And I'm reading right now something saying that he was very fluent in Philo's works. So it's one of these type of Christians that I've been talking about, or Jews, I should say.
Yeah.
That were Greek speaking, Hellenistic, more free thinking, more liberal version of Judaism, which is what Apollos was. Is one of those guys.
He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. He powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that Christ was Jesus.
And
by the scriptures too. That's the only way that they knew of Jesus was from the scriptures.
And Tiberius Julius Alexander also was from Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
But he's one of these half Jews that doesn't care about Jerusalem. He likes the world. He's a world guy. You know what I mean? And that's what you're basically seeing. That's why there's so much tension between Christians and Jews. Not because they're opposites and different religions, but because they're coming out of the same tradition and competing with each other over who's correct about that tradition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
intersects, offshoots, Jewish sectarian infighting.
Yeah.
Okay. Liam Jarrett says Satan is still Abrahamic and Jewish. I agree too. That's why I never do play into anything. Satan.
I mean, it's a Hebrew word. So Satan is a Hebrew word. The word devil, diabolo, is Greek, but that comes from. That's just a translation of Satan.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard Christians say that, like, well, if Jesus isn't real, then how come there's all these Satanists? How come there's Satanists hate Jesus so much? They always say that. So I'm just like, I think that actually reinforces their brainwashing. Liam again says, thank you, Liam, says Jesus is actually Satan to the Jews, but not like Christians think. That's right. Froggy McGee says it's pretty sad and pathetic that most so-called intellects, teachers, historians, philosophers, scholars for so long have and still are constantly lying and are attacking our white European folk heritage still and trying to cover up the Abrahamics, genociding everyone for the last 2,000 years. Yeah, they'll cover up the Dark Ages. You had a Dark Ages debate.
Yeah. There is no literature that besides, I mean, you have some epics like Beowulf. You get the King Arthur legends that come out of the Middle Ages. Other than that, and those come out of a literary tradition that makes it all the way to Britain, which is cool. It was cool. But like, other than that, you have nothing. You have like complete radio silence of literature for centuries during the Dark Ages.
Do you think that was like incompetence and it's just like a failed system, or do you think they were intentionally trying to keep everybody like dumbed down slaves that were illiterate so that they could be brainwashed by the pictures of Jesus and the story that's being read by the priest, but they could never read it for themselves?
Yeah, what you're looking at is like socioeconomic warfare in its final stages. Like it made like this movement that worked its way from the bottom and seeped its way into the Senate and into these places of who control burials, and all of a sudden they're in charge of literature and they're in charge of libraries. And now they're all of a sudden they're right in the emperor's ear, and like that's a game of political, and they're playing it right. And so that their way of taking over is not by the culture going to them, but taking over the culture from the inside out, like that.
Mm-hmm. A couple more super chats here, and if you still have any more of that video queued up, we didn't.
Oh yeah,
you want to play a little bit more of that too?
I could pull it back up.
Okay. Lot of sense says, this is a quote from Robert Ingersoll. Since the murder of Hypatia in the 5th century, when the polished blade of Greek philosophy was broken by the club of ignorant Catholicism until today, superstition was detested every effort of reason. In Darkening Age, I think it's where it was, she writes about how disgusting it is that these mobs of Christians were chopping off the noses. According to like what it says in the Talmud, to remove the power of an idol, you can chop off a limb or one of its noses. So we see all these, they carved crosses into them too.
Yeah.
But like these mobs of Christians that were like,
they destroyed all the artistic brilliance of the ancient world.
Yeah.
Gone.
So like these mobs, they were like low IQ, low class, dirty, smelly, violence.
Yeah.
Detestable, and like they can never create any of this art or architecture that they're just destroying in the name of the God of Israel.
Yep. And that's why, and their philosophy, their worldview is based on bottom-up approach, based on the one who gives up all of his possessions and becomes a slave and lives on the street with no food. It can fast and you can just submit to God. That's the highest in the kingdom. Those are the people who need to be praised. And there's a psychological effect to that. Everyone wants to be that. You end up finding in the sources Christians that are living on pillars for months, trying to show off how great and how aesthetic I am. Look at me. I'm sitting outside. I'm just being a beggar.
They also wanted to get killed too. They wanted to be martyrdom was so valued.
Yeah. And you flipped the entire system on its head, where you had like, a sort of like a setup where it's like the nobles are on top and the warrior class, and then the Senate class, the judicial class, and all types, and then it gets down to the plebs, right? Whereas
they hated the world and they want the world to hate them. They hate the worldly wisdom. They love their ignorance.
Right. Anyone who's puffed up in knowledge, who has a lot of knowledge, who reads a lot and does a lot of those are all bad. That's all. You're being earthly. You should be worrying about the spiritual. Like they flip the entire paradigm on its head, where all of a sudden bottom is up and up is down. It's it's an opposite worldview is what
it's like anti-nature almost.
Yeah.
Froggy McGee says, Drum and Bass World says Romans 11 always shut down anti-Semitism by the most devout Christians. Popes all throughout history protected Jews against peasants, kings, etc. And there would be some, like the pogroms that did happen, it wouldn't be like ordered by the king. The king would like stop it and condemn it, basically. a lot of
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah,
Or
there's
popes.
definitely a power struggle. There's definitely well, it was a balance of power, but it was definitely a struggle of power between the kings and the kingdom, and then the church.
Mhm.
And the church, what the church is doing, the word bishop comes from episkopos in Greek. It means overseer. A bishop is an overseer. Their job is to go from you're a bishop of a certain city, the bishop of Rome, the bishop of Antioch, the bishop of Alexandria, and so forth, right? Bishop of Constantinople. And they're set up in their cities to be the highest of their church. So they're like that's why the word pope means like father. The pope was the bishop of Rome. So every city had their own pope, in theory. This is like the Orthodox way, where every city has their own bishop. But what their bishop is they are the overseer of the ruling class of that city. So that city might have a king, like King Herod. He's a client king. He's not the king of all of the Romans, but he's a king of this little area right here. So then the bishop's job would be to go into that little area and just oversee, and then right back to the Church of Rome or the Church of Constantinople. And basically you're spying on these people. And you're sending them back messages going, here's what the king's doing, here's what his policy is, here's what he just did differently this month, here's what he's doing. And you're setting up a spy system.
They were spies. Yeah. I think it was John Chrysostom also had churches spy on each other, and they'd go into people's homes too and look around for pagan stuff, or like,
they're like ancient
people sinning. They convince people to report on each other and spy for each other. And this reminds me, I just saw last night the Orthodox Church in Russia worked with the KGB, and their code name for the head of the KGB church was KGB Church, Russian Orthodox KGB Church, was Songbird, because he would sing, all of the. He was the informant on what was going on in the religion, basically.
That's what a bishop's supposed to do. Their job, and their allegiance is not with the country they live in. It's not with those people. Their allegiance is to the church. So if they have to, set their king up, they will. They will stab him in the back if it means helping the church.
Thank you so much. Loving my confusion with the huge dono says, don't often get to listen to you live. I've just really benefited from your last few shows. Love Neil too. I ordered that book, Darkening Age. Looking forward to it. So good to hear, Loving My Confusion. I'm happy you liked the last few shows.
Nice.
Every show gets better and better. And yeah, Neil's channel's been awesome. I've been watching Neil since he first started.
Yep. And another thing with
best
the whole
work on the internet.
The other thing with the whole Darkening Age thing is like, people will say, okay, yeah, I'll hear people say, I'll admit you're right about the early Middle Ages. That was dark. It was, literature was dead. The Goths did pretty good. The Goths had the Goths rose up and took over the West. And like they had a nice little mini golden age for a little bit. They had some good artworks. They didn't write anything down. They didn't write anything special. But anyways, put that all aside. They'll say, but the Renaissance, now that was Christianity in its prime. That was Christianity giving,
They'll say science, the scientific method came from Christians, they'll say, or all science came from Christians.
And it's so funny because the person who coins the term scientific method is citing Aristotle, going back to pre-Christian times and going, Aristotle, his inductive reasoning method is how I get the scientific method, instead of being, so they're building off Archimedes, this great inventor from ancient Greece and lived in Sicily. Da Vinci is copying him in his works. So like their technology and science was being done in ancient Greece long before the Christians invented it. What they had to do to get there is they had to go back to a previous age and open back up Aristotle, open back up Archimedes, and open back up Galen and some of these ancient Greek sources in order to proceed with growing the scientific knowledge that we have. So what you see what you're seeing in the Renaissance is not Christianity blooming like a flower. It's Christianity going, we need to go back to before us because we're getting in the way of shit. You know what I mean?
And they'll lie and say that Christianity didn't do anything to hinder progress or scientific development. And it's like every day I'll still see online on Twitter Christians denying evolution.
Denying evolution.
Or denying space. They say space is fake because there's a firmament and the Earth's flat and evolution is fake. For the only reason they deny it is because it contradicts Genesis.
Yeah, flat earthers are usually just Christians that they read Genesis and they're like, that sounds like a flat earth, and I need that to be true. Yep. So this is all a lie. Just convince themselves that it's all a lie.
Corn Pop the Bad Dude for 20 says Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are like Marvel movie 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
There's a good meme like that. It has compares it to Star Wars, I think.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And they all got all Islam's growth, Christianity's growth. So all the Judeo-Christian religions' growth is based on social pressure and fabrications.
Yeah.
And like fake letters that are written between Christians, and
all of it's forgery. Even Bart Ehrman, his book Forgery.
Even things down to the Shroud of Turin. Mm-hmm. It's all forgeries. It's all people lying to pursue this religion.
The Josephus passage, forgery.
Yeah. All of it's made up and rewritten, redacted and forged, and they're all just it's like you're
And they were censoring and burning and destroying, or not preserving all the other philosophical knowledge and histories and all of the other mythologies as well.
We keep convicting Christianity's past with like solid slam dunk evidence against how it was, and people still keep following it. It's like it's the only choice. If
the church had the power that they once had, you and I would have already been burned at the stake long ago.
We'd be gone. And this is what they'll say. They'll say
now they just try to burn your character.
Look how much better the West is. Look how much better the West is compared to the Middle East. Obviously, Christianity is doing something right, and it's like, well, yeah, because of the Enlightenment, classical liberal paradigm that you're living in. That's who you should be giving credit to, not Judeo-Christianity, because like constitutional republics, having libertarian style democracy like we have here, that is going back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. That's not going into medieval serfdom of Christianity, Catholicism. No, it's not.
Got another big dono from Kyle. Thank you so much, Kyle. Says, both of y'all keep up the good work. I was watching you before this. I was trying to create the thumbnail and get a picture of you. So I Googled you and I saw a video. One of the first videos that popped up was you on Danny Jones. And the title was like, DMT makes me smarter or something like that. I thought that was pretty funny. That was cool. That's funny. And, but yeah, you're killing it.
Thanks.
I can't wait to do really into this stuff. I can't wait to see all the footage you're getting from Greece too, with your nice new rig and
yep. I got everything set. I'm ready to go. A couple more days, I'm out of here.
I can't wait to hear the interview from that guy too. Why? I want to hear what he has to say about the Orthodox Church in Greece.
Yeah, and I actually got lined up with an Orthodox priest too to just set him down. I'm just gonna kind of be like, what are your thoughts on the Temple of Pan? Why are you against it? That's what I want to get his thoughts. I just think it'd be good to get two sides of the interview. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a angle to like trap him and make him look bad or something.
That's what I was thinking about, because I do want to get a little bit. I want to push back a little bit on this. Some of the things I don't want to be too nice.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be like too combative. I want to be able to be slick about it and be like,
who do you think you are to say that nobody else can put up a temple?
Right. And like I want him to look at the fact that all the great stuff about Christianity is adopted from the Greco-Roman paradigms that they're lived in. Like it's in the cultural milieu, I should say. So like the idea of the nuclear family, that's a great idea, right? We all agree. People should have families. People, a child should have a mom and a dad, and family is good. But that's not, Christianity didn't bring us that. You can find in the Augustine reforms laws that like benefits families and stuff like and
Yeah.
farm situations.
That's the other thing I'll hear from these Christians in debates. They'll say, we need Christianity, even if it's not true. We need Christianity. Otherwise, the birth rates will plummet and we won't have kids anymore. And civilization will disappear and the birth rate and replacement rates and all this. Like the Bible says one thing about be fruitful and multiply. Like you can't just have that as a value in your culture without the Bible.
And that also presupposes that you're either an atheist or a Christian. There's nothing in between.
Right.
It's nonsense. Most people are something in between. You know what I mean? They're not just going to be like complete atheistic and I don't want to have any children because I think it's wrong. We should all kill ourselves. Like, no, most people don't think like that.
No. And not to mention that every culture and every species forever has the instinct to reproduce. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Life wouldn't be, have exploded as it always have if there wasn't the ability to reproduce. But no, we can't do it without the Bible. No morals, no reproduction. We couldn't defend ourselves from Muslim invaders in the past if we weren't Christian. All of these lies that we hear over and over again that have been debunked so many times, and they don't care. They just always double down.
And then you get these Twitter Christians that have like their knights, they're like anonymous with like a knight head on there or something, or a guy with a sword or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they act like Christianity's history was like this great warrior crusaders. That's where all the Christians were walking around with their armor and their sword. And this is how the world was. It was so cool. And it's like, actually, the Christians got their asses handed to them by the Muslims. They lost Jerusalem. They lost Alexandria. They lost Antioch, Syria. They lost Constantinople. They lost Carthage. They lost Spain for like 8 centuries. They lost everything. They had to flee into Russia and barely survived. And now they're splintered off into 10 million sects and denominations. They got their asses beat, even by the Mongolians later.
And by liberalism now too. All the churches are becoming like, all progressive and liberal and super pro-Israel and Protestant and Zionist and stuff.
That's why I was saying earlier, like when you look at online Christians, a lot of them will come off as like anti-Jewish or whatever. But then when you look at like high-level church positions, whether it's a Catholic church or Orthodoxy, high level, we're talking cardinals, bishops, patriarchs, that level stuff. If you look at all their profiles, all of them are pro-Israel. They're all very center right, like kind of like corporatist, like international banking, all that stuff, NATO, free trade. They're all like that's how they all are. That's how you get to that position.
The e-Crusader Christians are like just LARPing liars living in an alternative reality. That they don't even go to church, most of them. I had a thought today. I probably spent more of my life in church than most of these Christians online, attacking me. I went I never missed church the first like 15 years of my life. And they would be kicked out of their churches. They try to say any of this stuff, they stay online. Like go into any church in the world and say Jesus wasn't Jewish and Christianity didn't come from Judaism. You will be laughed out of there and excommunicated
out of that parish, right? They'll be like, you're too wild for us. We don't want you around.
And they'll go, they're not real Christians. Every Christian is the only real Christian. Always. I have a good meme for that, actually.
Everyone's going to hell except for us, because we tweaked our theology just a little bit in the right direction. We all agree on almost everything. We all agreed there was a Jesus who did miracles and died and rose on the 3rd day. We can all they agree on the most basic stuff, but those little tiny disagreements on like which version of the Bible we should have, that's going to put you in hell.
The online internet Christians,
right?
All of the Christians of the world, those aren't the real Christians,
right?
And then when you try to debate and like address what Christianity actually is, they'll go, "No, you have to debate me. I don't believe that." It's like,
right? You're just getting a whole nother. It's hilarious because either you're sola scriptura, dude, and you appeal to yourself, and then you can just say whatever you want, or you just say, "I don't care what my opinion is. I just appeal to my church." Then you just get out of any argument that you want.
Yeah, appeal to the authority.
Not my idea. It's my church, right? It's the exact opposite, but they're still getting away with it somehow. You know,
Let's do a little bit more.
that
We'll
video.
go maybe another 5-10 minutes. Let's do a little bit more of this video that you got. I want to.
Yeah, I got.
I want to laugh at the stupidity a bit more. These stick figures.
Yeah, it's funny.
And the guy that made this has attacked me and
So,
in bad faith, and is always like, "Oh, you're scared to debate me. You're scared to debate me. I exposed you." It's like
I'll debate him. I'll debate him on this topic. The facts are on my side. The sources are on my side. So, you want to play it?
oh yeah, sorry, I gotta put it up. I forgot.
Yeah.
There we go.
Judah sold Joseph into slavery for silver, much like Judah sold Jesus to the Jews. So the Bible portrays Judah as a jealous villain and Joseph as the chosen son.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I love
No,
how he shares that and doesn't realize like it's a myth based on another myth.
But he doesn't realize that Joseph's genealogy goes through Judah. Dumbass. This whole part is so dumb because, Joseph is so great and Judah's so bad. But Joseph, the father of Jesus, is also a Judahite. So it's just so silly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah.
While in slavery, Joseph would rise to become the prime minister of Egypt and father two sons named Ephraim and Manasseh. In the end, Israel would adopt Joseph's sons and pass the Abrahamic blessing on to them, making them the chosen people and dividing Joseph into 2 tribes, making 13 tribes of Israel. As for the father of the Jews, his 2 eldest sons.
Remember earlier, there's not a single primary source from any kingdom, Assyrian kingdom, Babylonian kingdom, Hittites, Egyptians, you name it. Nobody. And not, by the way, not even from Israel, even from sources that we find in Judea and Israel. There's never been a source that says anything about in the land of Manasseh, in the land of the tribe of Judah, or Judah, I should say, it's a kingdom, or in the land of the tribe of Gad. Those 12 tribe land allotments does not exist. 12 tribes doesn't even exist.
It's just as fake. Yeah, it's just as fake as the 12 disciples. It's based on astrology.
Based on exactly.
And we're pretending Joseph was real. So he literally went from a slave in Egypt to being the prime minister and did all of this stuff with the famines and the visions. And there's nothing written about him anywhere.
Yeah, it's another Forest Gump thing. Joseph in the Old Testament he's right next to Pharaoh, hanging out with Pharaoh and doing all this crazy shit and winning wars and winning. And you look at the Egyptian records, you're like, this should be so easy to find based on what they told us. Nothing. Nobody mentions Joseph. He doesn't exist. Not a real person.
If it was real, it'd be the #1 thing written about.
You'd have him. Yeah, you'd find something.
If Exodus was real and the 10 plagues happened, it would be written about, and everybody in Egypt would have believed in that God that did all of those miracles. If they were real.
Why would they keep continuing to worship the false gods that gave them plagues when you just saw miracles right in front of your face?
It's like, Yahweh killed all our firstborn sons, but I'm gonna still keep believing in Horus and Osiris. It's like, no, you would be like, okay, that God's the real one.
Right. Exactly.
Sons would die and Judah would end up bowing down to Joseph. So now that you understand that the Jews were never intended to bless the world, nor were they ever considered the chosen people, we can move on to our second.
He never even addresses that Jesus' genealogy comes out of Judah. I can't believe he never says that. It's so crazy.
And how is he avoiding the simple fact that the Judah is the only remaining descendants of the blessing of Abraham?
Right. He doesn't even bring it up. So you don't even know what his opinion is on that because he doesn't even address it. It's like
they'll do the same thing. Yeah, they'll be like, it's Genesis 12. The descendants of Abraham, curse them and you'll be cursed, bless them and you'll be blessed. Like our Christian politicians will say, it says curse Israel and you'll be cursed. And then the Christians go, it doesn't say Israel there. It says the descendants of Abraham. But it's like, so who are the only known descendants of Abraham were the tribe of Judah, the remaining tribe.
All themselves Judaios. They literally say we're Jews. That's so funny.
So is the Jewish homeland Israel? And the answer is yes and not at all. Israel was originally
The answer is yes and not at all. What a stupid answer.
Dude.
called the land of Canaan, named after Noah's grandson, Canaan. The land of Canaan was called...
Oh my God. You can have the land be Canaan and still be Jews. You realize that, right? This guy's so obsessed with like this was called Canaan. This was called this. Shem was that. Like trying to do all this word game shit. But the reality on the ground is those people on that arrow that you're pointing to it, where Canaan is, call themselves Judaios, Jews. That's where they came from. They came from that part of the world. They're Jews and they're Israelites and they're Canaanites. They're all of that stuff. But they're the same people. You know what I mean?
Conquered by the Israelites after they left Egypt with Moses, found in the book of Exodus. The Bible says God commanded the Israelites to punish the Canaanites for their sexual immorality, which led to child sacrifice, which would...
Again, another story that was written 2 centuries, or 2 millennia after the supposed, like Joshua's conquest. We're talking going back until like the Bronze Age. So, and it's written in the Hellenistic period, probably, or something like that. 400 BC.
Yeah. Before you start that, I have a super chat related to this. Aiden Whites says, do you have an answer for pagans doing human sacrifices being an amoral religion?
Pagans are the first people to condemn human sacrifice. Aristotle condemned it. Plato condemned it. The Greeks outlawed it centuries before Christianity ever existed. Sulla in 80 BC, right around there, gave more harsher death penalty laws on people that were caught doing human sacrifice. Human sacrifice was called out by pagans before anyone else called it out. Paganism is not a unified religion. There are philosophical, there are reasonable, Platonic, Pythagorean pagans out there that aren't human, cannibalistic, orgiastic, barbaric, whatever stereotype you have in your head of what a pagan is.
You know how I think the sacrifices started too? It was like the priest class and the seers, like they were like the leaders of different tribes, right?
Yep.
And if there was somebody that was a threat to them and their authority, it's like, nope, you're being sacrificed to the gods. I think that's kind of how it started. It was just like a dictator taking out their threats.
The Jews came from a part of the world where the human sacrifice was the most rampant. And going all the way back to the Babylonians, they did a mock king ritual where they would take somebody, they would sacrifice him to the gods, and they would dress him up like a king and put purple on him and sacrifice him as a mock king ritual. And the Molech thing, the whole Molech, it's a type of sacrifice. It's human sacrifice. This was done by Israelites, Jews, for centuries, all the way up until the Hellenistic period. And then Carthaginians, there's evidence the Carthaginians are doing it in Carthage too. And guess who condemned them? Greeks, Latins, other pagans. That's what I'm trying to get people to say. Paganism is not this barbaric, orgiastic thing that you think. Paganism is a broad term, but pagans themselves condemn human sacrifice.
And I'll hear stupid comments from Christians that'll be like, oh, you pagan, what are you going to go sacrifice your baby, pagan? Like, done any sacrifices lately, pagan? Like I would ever sacrifice my child.
Your entire religion is based on the sacrifice of a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
And you're the one talking about us. Like, bro, your entire salvation depends on the blood of a Jewish person.
Yeah, they go, no, he ended the sacrifice, but it's still based on a human sacrifice.
Right. Yeah. You're worried about pagan sacrifices when your whole religion is based on the ultimate sacrifice. It's a human sacrifice religion, Christianity. It's literally
God sacrifice religion.
Yeah, but you're literally believing in a human being sacrificed for God. It's a human sacrifice religion. You know? It's ironic, isn't it? And they're the ones that are the ones who are guilty of that.
Corn Pop the Bad Dude says Jesus came to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. How is that a good thing?
Isn't that
dividing families?
That's like military multiculturalism right there. I'm gonna rip you out of your homes. And I'm gonna take you away from your families. And I'm gonna put mother against daughter and daughter against son. You know what I mean?
Aiden White says, "What about Norse pagans?
What about them? They're cool.
Like, did they do sacrifices? Anybody? I mean, there were sacrifices in the ancient world because people have always been superstitious.
Everywhere you go, you're going to have good people doing crazy or doing good, pious things. And you're going to have wicked people doing crazy, devilish, wicked things. That's everywhere you go. You're going to have both sides of that coin.
Yeah, and again, it's like I'm not saying we should believe, and I don't believe in any pagan gods. So I'm definitely not going to be. I'm not going to be like, oh, if we don't have Christianity, we're going to go back to sacrificing babies.
Right.
That's the type of things Christians will say. Without the Bible, we'd still be sacrificing babies.
It's nonsense. It is. They stopped sacrificing babies long before the Bible was ever written. You know, the Persians condemned it too, not just the Greeks. Persians too.
Froggy McGee. Did I read this one right? Okay. Christians, Muslims are basically Jews. So-called historians are claiming the Dark Ages never existed. Neil had a debate with a guy about that recently. Also, these retards online point to a cathedral as proof. Where could have been more as a folk? It breaks my heart. Varg and Adam were right and are right. And we need a global white European pagan revival. The majority of Christians in the world aren't even white, and I think they need a revival too.
Right. Isn't that funny though when you see the self-hatred of like people who are Christian but also want to be anti-Semitic, when they're like, oh, I worship this Jew, oh I hate Jews, oh I worship this Jew, oh I hate Jews.
Yeah. If you really want to hate the Jews and oppose the Jews, you got to believe they were chosen and worship their Messiah that was always meant to conquer us and believe in their God.
Right. It's just so funny. It's just like watching somebody in the most confused state ever. They don't know what to do next.
I know. And then how do they react? They lash out and call all of us Jews because we don't believe in magical Jewish prophecies.
Right. It's hilarious.
Liam says Persians were Zoroastrians and Second Temple Judaism took a lot from them, like the Sadducees, resurrection of the dead, judgment, afterlife, messianism, dualism, I think also. I could go on. And Liam again says all the 12 tribes are about the 12 zodiac signs.
Yeah, for sure.
Liam says, finding the Dead Sea Scrolls is a blow to Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism. There was no monolithic Judaism until Christianity came about. Just another example of Christianity serving Judaism.
Yeah, very true.
Pagan Christian mathematician, that's a new one here, says Easter eggs and the Abrahamic faiths are attempts at understanding the pyramids of Egypt, which preceded them by millennia. Well, that's a theory I've never heard before. Attempts to understand the pyramids. I'm not aware of the Bible saying anything about the pyramids. Are they even? Do they even know that the pyramids exist?
There's no mention of the pyramids in any Bible, in any major Bible story.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, what was the person saying about it though?
How could they? They had to have known about the pyramids though.
Yeah, they just don't mention them because it's not part of the story really. Like there's never any part. There's nothing going on in the Bible that the pyramids need to be mentioned. They don't mention other wonders of the world either.
I saw a Jay Dyer video saying that the pyramids is proof that the Bible is real. That the new discovery under the pyramids is proof the Bible's real. I'm just like,
what was a stupid argument for that again? That was so silly.
Something about the flood and Nephilim building them or something like that.
Oh my God.
I can't wait till it comes out that that's a bullshit study and they try to reproduce it and they can't.
They've already been saying that. It's already I can't believe he jumped on that shit. When I saw that silly scan they called it for the SAR thing, and I looked at that and I can't. This is so silly. There's no way that's real. Right away, I just could tell. And it turns out that I'm right. That none of it was peer reviewed. It was put together by a bunch of people who are they're known for their entire careers based on proving that the pyramids are like a power plant or something. And like they're the ones putting this out there, and none of it's going through academics, rigorous study, anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Son of Mars says, love of ignorance. I think you hit on something important. Christianity is their default thinking imparted upon them, and they love ignorance. They don't want to think or change or admit they were fooled. They think it's a weakness. I know all of these Christians I'll argue with, like they haven't read any of the material that I have. And like the biggest cope they'll say, I'm sure you hear this, Neil, you just don't understand Christianity.
Right.
Do you hear that one often? You don't in your comments, I'm sure.
Yeah. You just don't know our theology. You just don't know it. You can't do it.
And you were a Christian. You were a Christian like pretty recently.
Yeah. Up until 2020, right around there.
You sure broke out of that hard with the vengeance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was slowly leaving before that too. From like 2018 to 2020, I was like on my downslope. You know,
Zorn Der Edom says, great to see Gnostic Informant on again. Missed the first hour. Love the Dead Sea Scrolls talk last time. I don't think we talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls. You came on to expose the fake Torah, and then you came on to talk about pagan parallels right before Christmas, I think it was.
Yeah.
I did my own Dead Sea Scrolls 2-part series, and I'm going to do a third one soon. So maybe you're getting that mixed up. But,
yeah, I think so.
Dominic Buscemi says, Adam, I used parts of your Rabbi Destruction of America clip in my new video. Your comes in at the 10:44 mark. Thank you, Dominic. I'll check that out. Liam says, Bart says that it is the crucifixion that makes Jesus real. How the F is that? He says they would have never invented a crucified Messiah, which is
so stupid.
Thoroughly refuted.
Well, why would you invent a castrated savior, Addis? Who would invent that story? But it's invented. So you can use the same logic for any myth. Pull up any myth and go, why would you invent that?
You can't, and you can't invent a Messiah that like would win and rule the Romans. You can't
because the temple fell. When the temple fell, the Gospels had to have been written with a suffering servant. They're going right to Isaiah. They're going to read Isaiah, and they're going to write the character based on Isaiah. That's how it works. The servant fell. Israel was down. You know what I mean? Like the temple falling. That means the Messiah came, but it was the fall. It was the suffering one.
Spiritual victory. We lose in the real world, but we have a spiritual victory. Just the eternal copers. And it almost started in a way as a cope.
The Ben David Messiah, the triumphant one, that'll be the second coming. That's how they argue it. That's how they get out of it.
A lot of these Christians are like addicts. They're addicted to Jesus. They have guilt and they need it to cope with their guilt, to be forgiven, have their sins forgiven. And just like junkies, they're addicted to the way it makes them feel. And then whenever they're confronted with information that contradicts it or they're called out, they have copes and denial, just like addicts.
Yep. Yeah. And it's always, and then they project onto you, and you're right. It's like dealing with an addict. You're so right. It's like dealing with somebody who's like in you, and then you can it's crazy.
Anatomized Deception says, keep crushing. Pagan Christian mathematician says the name Egyptian pharaoh named Joseph did not appear until around 1300 BC. The original name for him was the Negerkit in 2700 BC.
That's not Joseph.
That's not Joseph.
No.
Drum and Bass Worlds.
What's the name? Let's look it up.
How does it spelled? DJOSER.
Oh, Joser. That's one of the pharaohs.
Joser. Yeah.
Yeah. It just sounds like Joseph, so they say it's Joseph. It's just nonsense. It's Joser.
Wrong etymology.
It's actually closer to Sesorthus in the original language. Like Joser is like some other way to say it. It's not Joseph though.
Here's a question from Drum and Bass World for Neil. I have only read a little of John Lash's book, Not in His Image. I was wondering what books you like the most on the Gnostics. Also, were the Gnostic pre-existing pagan mystery schools that hybridized with Christian movements? Favorite books on Gnosticism?
You know what? It depends, like on what book on them, or there's a text right here that I have. Hang on a second. This one right here, I would recommend. It's called the Gnostic Bible. And it's just basically it's just filled with all the Nag Hammadi, all the literature that they found on Gnostic sources, basically all in here. The Nicene documents in here, like the Valentinian stuff is in here. You get like all these other Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Judas. It's all in here.
Yeah, Secret Book of James, I think, is in that one. Yep. I got that from the library and took some passages for my book about the Gospel of Secret Book of James.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a good starting point, I would say.
Tales of the Levant says, Neil, what do you think of Richard Elliott Friedman's approach to dating the Torah early based on the Hebrew script, with the J source being the earliest? I want to like the late dating models, but Friedman's scholarship still seems solid.
Yeah, I get told that all the time, that Friedman is the paradigm and we're all just living in it. But I think it's starting to fall apart recently. I don't think it's holding up to recent scholarship like Adler and others. I don't think it's, and you even got other older academics like Israel Finkelstein. I have a clip from him that I'm going to show in one of my next videos where he's asked about Jonathan Adler's work about Judaism being a product of the 2nd century BCE. And then not only that the Torah is from like the 3rd century or 2nd century BCE. And he agrees with that. Like he's came out on in some academic setting and was talking about how that's what he's been thinking the entire time. And it was like he couldn't agree more with his conclusion. So
I know a book that you suggested. It's the book that Neil suggested for me. Let me grab it real quick.
All right. While you're saying that, I'm just I just think you got it.
I got it. Guilty though. Haven't read it yet, but the Middle Platonist.
Oh yeah, I got that right here. Yeah,
it's a big one.
Middle Platonist. This is huge, dude. Yeah, this is because this is the backdrop that Christianity is living in. This is that period between 80 BC and 220 AD, the philosophy of the time period. Plutarch is in here, Eudorus, Philo, Atticus, Albinus.
Let's do one more laugh from this crap video.
All right, let's watch it.
And then we'll wrap it up here. Thanks for staying a little longer with us. I said, well, maybe hour and a half, whatever, but I don't know. It went by fast. And
yeah, that's cool.
Would eventually lead to cannibalism. The word cannibal actually comes from the words Canaan and the god Baal. Baal was the god of Canaan, and the priests were known for eating the children after.
And notice how it's the Israelites that are doing it, not pagans.
Where is word cannibal from? I wonder what.
I don't know. I don't know if this is true or not.
I know. I bet it's not. It's the Spanish word cannibal, which Christopher Columbus used to describe the Carib people of the West Indies.
Yeah, so you just made that up.
Yeah,
it's
just
seen it in Baal. By the way,
lie.
Baal was not actually a human sacrifice god either. Baal was like Zeus.
Baal is the son of, or Baal is the son of El. So it's like Jesus is basically Baal.
Yeah, he's a dying and rising god too. It's one of those gods. Want to keep going?
How do they get something so wrong like this? And does he prove? Does he show a source or any proof of this? It's he doesn't know any of the original languages at all. He just
thought it sounded
Canaan
good.
And Baal. It kind of sounds the same, so I bet you that's what it's from.
This is what like Amun does, or like Ralph Ellis. They just make up their own shit, and if it sounds good, they just roll with it.
To him, hence why we call them cannibals. So now that you understand what kind of people were living in Canaan, try not to feel so bad when you read that God ordered us to exterminate them.
He told the Jews to exterminate everyone else. He didn't tell them to exterminate the Jews. Did you see what he just said? Did you see how he just spin that?
I missed it. I was looking it up.
You want to hear this?
Yeah, I said, is it related to Canaan and Baal? And it says, no, this pops up on fringe theories and etymological speculation.
Yeah, he just made it up. Listen to this, though. Listen to this.
Canaan, try not to feel so bad when you read that God ordered us to exterminate them. The borders of the Jewish homeland were...
He just tried to spin it like God told us to exterminate the Jews. He just totally flipped the whole narrative on its head. No. God told the Jews to eliminate non-Jews. That's what really happens in the story. You just you just try to say the opposite is true. Like, no, you're still dealing with other Canaanites, killing other Canaanites. They're all, who become the Judaios. He just never addresses this part. He just keeps going. Look at
established by Joshua, who was one of the descendants of Joseph and not from Judah.
But guess who is from Judah?
Jesus.
So if we were to restore the Jews to their original land, according to the Bible, the Jewish homeland would look less like this.
I love how he holds weight on the fact that Joseph is not from the genealogy of Judah. Like, that matters to him. Oh, if it came from the genealogy of Judah, that would be bad, wouldn't it? Oh, you mean like Jesus? Like Jesus himself was from the line of Judah, dumbass.
It's
I wonder
weird
if
how
he
he
even
just like
knows
loves all of the tribes but the tribe of Judah.
Right, but the one, and it happens to be the one that his Messiah comes out of it. It's like perfect.
Mhm.
It's like perfect satire for that to be the thing. They hate the Jews, but their Messiah is literally from that one line, that line of Judah. That's got to sting.
I know.
Because even under their definition of, well, Judah is an Israelite from the 12 tribes. Even under that definition, Jesus is still a Jew. That's how bad it is for them.
And more like that. So, like the story of Joseph and Judah, their children likewise wouldn't get along either. After becoming nations, there would be a civil war. The Jews would
They never became nations. There never was a civil war. None of that ever happened. You just made that up.
rule the southern kingdom of Judea, while Joseph's sons would rule the northern kingdom.
And that's not what happened either. Nobody in any sources, not even the Bible, ever said that then Joseph's sons ruled the north and Judah's sons ruled the south. No one ever said that. That doesn't exist. It's only in this video and in this person's head.
Keeping the name Israel. They would have different religions, believe in different gods, and while Judah
No, they didn't. They all worship Yahweh.
Gotta love how there's not one citation in all of this either. Like he could
No.
pop on a couple verses on the screen or something to support what he says, or nothing.
Yeah. You want to know what's even more fascinating about what he just said? Judah, the bad kingdom, is where all of the activity of all the prophets of the Old Testament is taking place. And the Bible is written in Judah by Jews. The Old
Where
Testament,
the temple was.
yeah, that's where the temple is. That's where all the kings are living. That's where all the prophets are. That's Judah, not Israel. And by the way, if anything, it was the kingdom of Israel who were pagans back then, worshiping Baal and Asherah in the north. That was common in the north. Judah was a little more reserved to Yahweh. So, and it's so funny because the good monotheist that he's trying to be was Judah, not the other way around. All the good Israelites were actually pagans. So it's just so funny how much he doesn't even understand how bad how much opposite of what he's saying is true.
Judah stayed in Judea, Joseph would ally himself with the Phoenicians and establish colonies and trade posts all over the Mediterranean.
Again, he just made that up. Joseph never came back to Israel. He dies in Egypt.
Yeah, he dies in Egypt, and they bring his bones back in the Exodus.
There is no Joseph ruling in Judea. That was made up.
The kingdom of Israel would be corrupted by foreign ideologies, and like the Canaanites would fall into materialism, sexual morality, and child sacrifice, which would lead to them being conquered by the Assyrian Empire. Some of the Israelites would be taken into captivity into the lands of Assyria and Media, while some of the Israelites and Phoenicians would flee to their colonies and trade posts, fulfilling the promise made to Abraham that the world would be blessed through him, as he would be the father of many nations.
This is so delusional. Holy shit.
So the sons of Joseph would become fruitful and multiply among the nations, forgetting who they are, which shouldn't surprise us considering their names literally mean fruitful and forgetful.
Hold on, back that up. I want to see if that's true.
I don't know.
I'm guessing Manasseh does not mean forgetful. Oh, it's.
By the way, isn't it funny how he's
God loves the white chosen people so much that he decided to have the Jews steal our identity and send us across the world, forgetting that we were chosen. Like what an awesome plan, God.
It's making my head hurt thinking about how this can make sense in anyone's mind, because he just attributed the future of them forgetting and being fruitful to their names.
That's the best, huh?
They got named this by Abraham.
I thought
therefore it all came true. Like,
what's the name? How do I spell the name? I want to see.
Huh?
How do you spell that name? Manasseh.
Manasseh. Manasseh. Yeah.
Manasseh and
Manasseh.
Okay, breakdown. I'm going to say, what does that name mean? Oh,
forgetter.
Genesis 41:51. Joseph, son of Jacob, names his firstborn Manasseh, saying, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household.
What was the other one? Ephraim?
Yes.
Yeah, fruitful. fertile,
fruitful.
Yeah.
Genesis
So
41:51.
So you know what that means, right? It's just a fable.
God made me forget all my trouble. That doesn't.
Yeah.
Does
I'm
that
gonna
sound
name
like
my son
forget that we
Forgetful.
were the chosen people?
Right, and it's not. It's a fable. It's a freaking fable. Whenever you have story where the person's name, like the person's name is Sleepy, he's tired all the time because his name is Sleepy. That's Fable 101. That's how you know it's a fable when the person's name is the thing that they're doing in the story. My name is Ant-Man, and I look like an ant. It's a fable.
Yeah,
So when you have a person named Forgetful, and then his brother's name is Fruitful, and they are the fathers and of all the people who were fruitful and forgot. Wow, that's not a fable. That's really must be historically true.
No, but it is true that they believe it derives from the Hebrew word to forget. But it says forget all my troubles.
Yeah.
You're going to spin that into forget that you were the chosen people. Do you have any other evidence of God's plan to have the chosen people forget who they are? What kind of shitty plan is that, by the way?
Yeah, it's almost, but he's almost like telling his audience, you might be one of these people. Oh,
no, it's definitely what he's saying.
Yeah.
So the sons of Joseph would become fruitful and multiply among the nations, forgetting who they are, which shouldn't surprise us considering their names literally mean fruitful and forgetful. Just like the Northern Kingdom, the Jews would fall into sexual immorality and start sacrificing their children.
What's so funny about that is if you actually read the Old Testament, if you read Kings and Chronicles, 95% of the time, Judah was the one that was actually sticking to worshiping just Yahweh. And the north and Samaria, they are the ones who kept falling back into idolatry and doing evil human sacrifice. He just totally takes that and flips it on its head for this video.
Here's what ChatGPT says. Joseph is speaking metaphorically here. All my toil refers to the years of suffering Joseph endured, being sold into slavery, living in Egypt, being imprisoned, and the all my father's house doesn't mean he literally forgot his family. It means that the pain and trauma associated by the betrayal of his brothers and being torn from his home were eased. That's what the. So it has a perfect symbolic meaning, naming that name because of the story of Joseph. Nothing about forgetting who you are, forgetting that you have the birthright.
Yeah, it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. Keep going.
They would be.
Yeah, let's do one more, but I gotta go. I gotta go get the babies ready for bed.
We'll do like another 30-second hit. All right.
Yeah.
Conquered and enslaved by the Babylonians, then freed and reestablished by the Persians, conquered again by the Greeks, and later occupied by the Romans. While under Roman rule, the Jews would launch the greatest revolution in Roman history, known as the Great Revolt, which would fail, causing Judea, Jerusalem, and the Jewish temple to be destroyed, ironically fulfilling everything Jesus and the Christians said would happen.
Other way around.
Dude, they wrote these books after the temple.
Yeah, exactly. Dumbass.
They're like, oh, what's your proof? They predicted it after the fact. It's like a great proof.
Right. And that's when they show up in the sources, by the way, is second century.
Are people really impressed by the claims like this?
Right. No, I guess.
Okay, do one more. One more.
All right.
The Jews, not being satisfied with losing their temple and homeland, would stab the Romans in the back by launching 2 more rebellions, killing over 500,000 Greeks and Romans. God would bless the chosen people with 2 more humiliating defeats, along with a banishment from the land, causing Judea to be renamed to Syria Palestina.
Hold on, pause it. God blessed the chosen people. How did he bless Europeans?
Right. Yeah.
He blessed them by having them forget their identity and to be brainwashed by this fake Christian religion.
Isn't that something? Ironically, the people who actually were fruitful and did forget was all of these European pagan spots.
Yeah, I'll talk to Christians and they'll say Jews are cursed for killing God, for rejecting Jesus, but they'll also say Jews run everything. So it's like God cursed them to run and rule over you. Like that's your argument.
Opposite. It's the exact opposite. The demonic one is Judeo-Christianity. And look at this. He's like, oh, here's the funny part about this part of the video. I agree with you. The chosen people aren't not chosen, and they lost all their battles because they're not chosen. That's why. Now not because there's somebody else, because that's who really. It's still the chosen people, but he's right. They're not chosen because they're just not. You know.
All right, so we'll leave it there. The rest of it is just as garbage. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks all the big donos and support. We got one more in. EIQ Mystic says, thanks for covering the stick figure video. It comes up constantly. Yeah, it's shared all around. These Christians online don't care how stupid something is. If it affirms their belief, they'll share it, and their confirmation bias will say it's legit. And if you refute it, you're a Jew. That's what they'll say.
Yep, that's how they get around it.
Ignoring the fact that the guy that made it is Jewish, also.
Right.
But anyway, everybody go follow Neil at Gnostic Informant. Also follow him on Twitter. He's a little more active on Twitter. Always doing huge interviews and documentaries and live streams.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the big donos. Loving my confusion. Liam T. Jarrett for all your big donos today as well. Son of Mars, Drum and Bass World, Zornder Edom, Dominic Buscemi, Liam, everybody. Yeah, Seathward all says that video gets millions of views, and it's literally the worst garbage I've ever seen.
Right.
Closing words for us, Neil. Thanks for coming on, by the way, and sticking around longer.
Just remember, Christians did not build our society. They tore it down.
They tore it down. And we're going to tear you down for it. Till my dying breath, hail the old gods down with Yahweh. And you attain true gnosis. Neil's tagline. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you guys again probably tomorrow. Take care. Have a nice night.